Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
Well, if we can't have fun today, I don't know which Sunday we're going to have fun on, because we're going to be talking today about Sabbath and the rhythms of rest that God intends for our world and for our life. And so I'll just make it, this will be a short teaching today. God says take a day off. Let's pray. All right. No, you'll remember like in June, we spent a little bit of time looking in our Focus series on the kinds of action-oriented ways that we live as followers of Jesus and how that makes an impact in the world around us. And then we're taking the month of July to actually look at things that we can do to cultivate a life internally, like a deep-rooted life in God's presence, where all of a sudden we find that like we're empowered for the things that God calls us to do. And so I just came off of a week in Florida with my wife and her folks and her brother and family, and then our 4 children. And so we just did a plane flight home with 4 kids, 5 and under. And we were delayed numerous times and sat like out on the tarmac for an hour or so. And I was just thinking, man, I'm just like flushing that whole week of rest right now. Have you guys noticed that there's this way that like we need as people, we need to be like engaging in these rhythms where we're not just pouring out, but where we're also being filled up. And you remember last week we had this honor and this privilege of having Season Tingler come join us and talk about the hurried pace of life. And how many of you guys resonated with some of what she was sharing? I'm just curious how Western world has this pace and rhythm to it that's just like go and go and go and go. I really loved some of the things that Season drew out during that time. She talked about this quote from Corrie ten Boom that is essentially like, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you hurry, right? And then you'll miss all the things that God has for your life, not because you're in the process of sort of actively rebelling against God, but just because you are so busy that you never heard him or noticed him or engaged in a life with him. Richard Foster has written a book that's one of my absolute favorites called Celebration of Discipline. And in this book, he just talks about like these pathways for a life rooted in the presence of God. And he says this in his opening chapter: hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. Hurry is the thing that the devil does to keep people from engaging in a deep life with God. Which some of these sorts of ideas that Season brought up last week that we'll talk about today sort of cause us to have these questions internally, these questions about, well, how is my life actually put together? Is my life put together in a way that's sort of like copying and mimicking and reflecting Jesus? Or is my life actually sort of just lived in the normal cultural rhythms of the Western world, specifically the rhythms of America? And when Season started to read through this passage about Jesus saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden," like life has a weight to it, "and I will give you rest. Come and know the untold rhythms of grace," as Eugene Peterson says. There's this thing that rises up in me personally as I engage some of these thoughts where I have this question in my spirit where I go, man, is that like light and easy and joyful and fun thing that seems to be what Jesus is inviting us into, right? Is that lightness of life what I experience, or is it just like these little glimpses, these little moments? Is it something that's sort of fleeting and I experience it every now and again? Or is it the overarching reality of my life that because I have a life with Jesus, everything is lighter, everything is more joyful, everything is changed and different? Like, would somebody be able to look at my life and go, oh, that's one of the ones that follows Jesus. Look at the rhythms of his life. He's not always living in hurry and this frantic pace, and he doesn't feel like he's responsible for holding the whole world together. Like, that guy looks a little different than what we see all around us. Or when people look at my life, would they go, man, that dude is slammed. He is busy. He's got those 4 kids. They're chaos, right? They're always running and chasing and doing, and he's working, and he's like, if somebody were to observe my life, would they describe it as like, he's somehow figured out how to live in these rhythms of grace with God, where life is easy and life is light? See, many of us, I would suggest, have been so like rooted in our culture of busy pace of life that when we start to think about the rhythms of Jesus, these sort of like behind the scenes, the way that he withdrew to silence and solitude and spent time in prayer, the way that he took a day and did Sabbath, the way that he engaged with God, like he would slow down and let God interrupt. Like he'd be in a moment and then he would pause and realize, wait, this is a holy moment and we're going to stay here a little bit longer before we move on to the next thing. When we look at those rhythms of the life of Jesus and how he did his world, so many of us go, well, yeah, okay. Yeah, but he's Jesus, right? He doesn't understand my world. I'm a parent. I got 4 kids. Maybe I'll have time for that light and easy kind of living when all these kids are out of the nest, right? Parents, have you ever told yourself this? Like, okay, listen, if I can just get my kids through this stage to the next stage where they're a little more independent, then I'll have freedom. Is it true? Yes. Thank you. One of the things that I've noticed in my own life is whatever I project onto the next season, I figure out a way to busy up my world again in the next season. So like whatever freedom I do reclaim in a season of life, I just find a way to busy it right back up. Anybody experience this? And so a fascinating thing I think happens internally for us as followers of Jesus, where we look at the things that he did and we go, that's it, that's the life, that's what I'm drawn to, and that's what I want my life to be about, that stuff. But then behind the scenes, the rhythms of his life that empowered him to actually change the world and bring the kingdom of God here and now, we're not quite as sold on engaging those rhythms. And it's like we find loopholes for it, right? Tell me if any of these loopholes sound familiar to you. I'm a parent. I'm exhausted when my kids are at the next phase. Then maybe I'll have some space and some time for like quiet and rest and solitude. And yes? Or how about this? I have a really important job and the buck stops with me for a lot of things. Maybe when I retire, all of a sudden I'll reclaim a bunch of space in life. But until then, it's time to hustle. So I don't have time for the rhythms of Jesus and these sort of like slower paces of life until I get through this season where I'm really important at work. Or maybe you're in this other place where you're like, actually, no, I'm not like important in some company that already exists. I'm actually trying to start up a thing on my own. And it's like, oh, Steve, you want to talk about rest or vacationing or taking a day off or spending time with God in the morning or in the evening? Well, here's the problem, Steve. I'm like 6 people and I can't hire anybody yet. I'm just getting this thing off the ground. When I've got like everything off the ground and I'm not having to be 6 people, then I'll engage these rhythms of Jesus that you're talking about. Or maybe it's the place that you live. Steve, I live on land. I have a full-time job outside of my full-time job. I got to take care of this place. Steve, I live in the suburbs. You don't understand what it's like to live in a neighborhood. Steve, I live in the city. The pace in the city is just a little bit different than what you're describing when you talk about the rhythms I see in the life of Jesus. Or maybe it's the next thing ahead of you in life. Oh, I got to work that second job. Why? Because we got to get the kids through college. And I just had I'm already thinking about it. I've got 3 daughters. You know how many weddings that is? That's 3 weddings. If everything goes great. Right? You start thinking it through and you're just like, I could loophole the idea of not resting, not engaging these rhythms that we see in the life of Jesus based on place I live or stage of life or kind of work I do or any circumstance in my world. And whatever our mission is, whatever our unique reason that we really just don't have time or space for the things that Jesus said, the things that Jesus did, to actually mimic the rhythms of his life and let his priorities around where time goes be like what we model our priorities around. I think if we were to be really honest with ourselves, what's really going on is that we're just saying, I know it's important, but I'm just too busy to do the Jesus way of life. I've got a different way of life. And I would have to let go of all kinds of things in order to start to mimic the rhythms that I see in Jesus' life. Here's another layer to that madness. You don't understand how important I am. If I did this thing of Sabbath, if I worked for 6 days and then I stopped and didn't work, if I did that rhythm that I see in the life of Jesus, do you know how much of the world would fall apart without me? Have you had that madness go through your head? No. I have to take this phone call. I have to engage. I have to respond to this. Because if I'm not there, do you know how many things could go wrong? I was on a road trip with a friend of mine. And we're driving across Kansas, and this is a really sort of important leader of the company I work for. A lot of decision-making rests with him, and we're driving across central Kansas, and we're just having a discussion. And I just have this moment where there's a pause in our conversation, and I look, the Kansas Turnpike when you're on 70, and you just see a stream of cars that you're driving with. If you look into the oncoming traffic, the other side, it's 100 cars a minute are whizzing by you. And I have this moment, I think it was a God moment, where God goes, Steve, let me give you some perspective about how important you are in life. About 100 cars a minute are driving past you the other direction, and none of them even knows you exist. They've got their own world. They've got their own life. And there's no Steve Jones in it, which is tragic. Don't they know they need me? But we live our lives many times like that. The world needs me. I can't disengage and rest, right? I was having another moment that was similar to that. God reminded me, my son just took his first plane flight. He's 3 years old. Have you ever watched a 3-year-old on a plane looking out the window? As you lift off and the ground, the distance between you and the ground grows. He looked down and I go, Jack, see the cars? And he looks at me and he goes, they're tiny. And I go, well, they're the same size. We're just getting higher up in the air. And then we kept flying and there were these squares. Have you ever, how the entire world is divided up into squares? Once you're flying, or circles, and it's a square, and then a little house on the corner, and then a square, and a little house, and it's just miles of this. The whole country divided up into squares. Every one of them has their own life, and they don't know that there's a Steve Jones either. Sometimes the madness of our belief that we can't disengage and rest is that we're way too close to the ground. And we believe that we're far too important, the world would come to a screeching halt without us. Which leads me to this thought. Perhaps the real issue that we have when we don't want to disengage and rest is the same issue that we see in the book of Genesis. It's this. If I ordered my life around the rhythms that God has, I would have to undo a bunch of the ways I do life and just reorder them. Well, but I like the way that I've created my life. See, the core issue in the book of Genesis is that people want to decide what's good, what's bad. They want to be God of their own universe. And as they leave the design and God's plan for them, they start to engage the kind of life they want to create, and there's all kinds of brokenness to it. I had this conversation with a friend of mine he would not say he's a follower of Jesus, but I would say, wait for it. And he was telling me, like, we were discussing all these different things, right? And in and out of conversation, I was saying to him, yeah, Jesus had something fascinating to say about what you're talking about. And I would share one of the teachings of Jesus with him. And then we'd talk about something else. And I would go, oh, yeah, Jesus had something to say about that too. And as we're talking, eventually we reach a point where he looks at me and he goes, I'm going to say this to you because I know that it's hard to offend you. But who cares what Jesus had to say about that? And I look at him and I go, oh, huh. I mean, I care deeply. But I see your point. Why care about what Jesus has to say about the world? And I believe this on a foundational level. If you were to look at the rhythm and the rhythm of the life of many people who follow Jesus, there's this disconnect between saying, no, I would never say who cares about what Jesus wants for my life in any place in my life. I wouldn't have the audacity to say that, but I would busy up my life so much that I couldn't hear his voice, and I wouldn't be paying attention moment by moment to the life that God has for me. See, the fascinating thing is this: if you do believe that God took on flesh and dwelt among us, then this is the God that made persons, who becomes a person, and he does being a person better than any of us would ever be able to do it. Would you agree? God takes on flesh, becomes a person. And it's amazing. There's this scripture that says this: he knew no sin. Jesus missed the mark in no places of life. Do you ever stop and think about this? Jesus didn't miss the mark in the way that he managed his time ever. He didn't mismanage what he said. He didn't mismanage what he did. He didn't mismanage what he thought. He didn't mismanage or miss the mark even in the way that he ordered priorities. In any of the ways that you could miss the point in being human, Jesus didn't miss the point. Jesus came and set on display what humanity was supposed to look like. So would you agree that if you believe that ordering the rhythms of life in the way that Jesus ordered his rhythms of life would bring you closer to being human the way that we were supposed to experience it? And so yes, we can rationalize away why it's just not practical for me to live in the rhythms of Jesus. But the truth of the matter is this: if we do order our life in the way that we see Jesus ordered his life, we'll get far closer to being human in the way that God intended for us to be human. And that brings us to Sabbath. I would say this: Sabbath, for many of us, we think about it as a time of rest, or a time of it's time that's sort of set aside. But I would say this: the closer we look at this rhythm of Sabbath in the life of Jesus, it is more connected, maybe even more deeply connected, to trust than it is to rest. 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. This is what is sort of laid out there for us as a rhythm of life. It's been fascinating. I know just by show of hands, how many of you know someone that takes Sabbath, like a day of absolutely no rest, play and joy and fun, and they go, oh, no, I can't do that thing that you want me to do? It's Sabbath. Does anybody know? So you know somebody, you kind of know maybe one. Anyway, you know somebody. I think I can count on one hand the people that I've come across that would go, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That's Sabbath. I'm going to be busy playing. I'm going to be busy enjoying the world, right? Here's something interesting. I want us to engage this in a little bit of a deeper way, because our relation to time and rest, sometimes we don't understand how much culture has gotten into our world around these ideas of rest and play and that kind of thing. But have you ever had these moments where you drive down the freeway and you see one of those lottery billboards? Yeah? and it's like, oh, jackpot's like $200 million. That means I'd get about half, right? If I won the lottery, I'd have $100 million. What would I do with 100? Have you guys done this? This is a little mental exercise. Okay, we're going to do something like that, but with time today. Here's the fascinating thing. I've done this little exercise with people before. Okay, you got $100 million. What happens now? You know what I've never heard somebody say in response? No, I'm good. You can keep it. I'm good with life. I'm content. I don't know. You could give me $100 million, but I wouldn't really change anything. I'm pretty happy. Here's a predictable thing that happens if you give someone $100 million as a mental exercise. The first thing that they say is, I would protect myself and the people that I love from harm. Right? So any place that like me or the people I love are sort of exposed or they don't have enough or their needs aren't met, I would take care of those needs. The second thing they say is, and I would insulate myself from discomfort. My car is uncomfortable, the AC doesn't work, and we live in Kansas City. I would get a different car, one with working air conditioning, right? I would insulate myself from some of life's discomforts. And the last thing that happens when you do this $100 million exercise is that people say this. They identify pleasures that they're not able to afford that they would start to engage, right? Oh, I mean, it's kind of fun to be on a boat, but what if you lived on a boat, right? It's like you start to think about what would be really joyful. So how can I insulate myself from pain? How can I take care of my own needs? How can I enjoy pleasures that I don't naturally have? It's pretty predictable what happens if you give somebody like an unlimited amount of money. The fascinating thing is this. We're going to do this little exercise today. If you were to give someone more time, a really similar set of things emerge. I'm not going to tell you what it is because we're going to do this exercise together, okay? So here's what I'd love for you to do. If you have some place to take notes or like your phone or somewhere to type something in, I'm going to give you a reflective exercise. You're going to type some things in, write some things down, and then you're actually going to tell me some of the things that you've written down. Is that all right? Are you okay interacting a little bit instead of just the one-way thing? Okay, so here it is. I'm going to walk you guys through this exercise. We're going to talk about our time, the way that we view it. All right, here we go. You ready for the game? You guys do not seem ready for the game. Are you ready for this game? Okay, good, because we're going to have to interact for the game to work. Okay. All right, guys, I have fantastic news. I've reached out to a few of my friends that are world leaders this week. Some real key decision makers. Don't ask me how I know them. I'm very impressive. And I brought to their attention something that is a universal human problem. Here's the problem. People never have enough time for the things that they need to do. So we start putting our heads together and we decide some things. We're going to extend the day from 24 hours to 26 hours. You're welcome. Don't worry about time zones and daylight and any of that. We've worked it all out, okay? You have a 26-hour day, 2 extra hours every single day. Now, here's the reflective exercise. In order for this plan to work, in order for them to green light a 26-hour day, they want to know from you guys, what kinds of things would you get up to in those 2 hours if we were to change everything? I've got to give them some feedback, right? So, you've got 2 extra hours a day, 14 extra hours a week. What would you do? You've got 2 minutes. Write it down, reflect. 2 extra hours a day. What would you do? I should have had the Jeopardy theme song. The silence is good for us. Just go with it. I see snickering. This is a good sign. 2 extra hours. All right, 30 seconds. All right, you guys can keep going if you want, but I'm going to start asking for feedback. You got 2 hours. What do you do with it? Somebody. Sleep? Oh, God bless you. I'm with you on that. You would sleep. What else? Say it again. Outdoor activities. Brilliant. 2 extra hours. What would you do? Look at the clouds and take more pictures. You should have seen the tops of the clouds over Tampa as we were flying. They were amazing. There you go. Bring me a picture. What would you get up to? More family time. Absolutely. That's great. What else do we got? All right. Do you have any like specific day of the week that you would think of, oh, on that day I could? You would get to whatever gets put off to tomorrow. That's brilliant. That is brilliant. I love that. Okay, what else? Come on. Yeah. What do you got? Yeah. Yeah, come on. Like a little bit of space to reflect, a little bit of space to just think in life, right? To even like look at relationships and ponder and think, right? What else? Anybody? Go for it. Can we do a crew? Barb, you're already trying to figure out how to game the system. Can I cash them out at the end of the year like unused vacation time? Oh, can I have a block of, yeah. Can they accrue? I don't know. I'll have to talk to the world leaders about it. We didn't anticipate this kind of feedback. I'm sorry. What else have we got? Yeah. Yeah, you would like do things that sort of recharge you a little bit and you wouldn't have to be in a rush about them, right? Anybody else have anything that's different than, yeah?
I would put it like that time right between 5 o'clock and bedtime because
go to the gym.
fix a meal,
You could actually cook things that are good for you.
and not distracted driving.
Yeah. The fast food, well, that's the economic impact of the fast food industry might be bad, guys. Yeah. What else we got? Yeah. There we go. I would stay ahead of my kids in Bible knowledge. That's brilliant. Absolutely. So many of us have these things. So here's an observation. Just as we've kicked around a few ideas, here's the 3 things that I wrote down that are observations as I've done this little exercise with people over the years. Many of the answers fall into the category of balance. Like something in life doesn't get its proper place or its proper time, and now with extra time, I would be able to include the things that always get pushed off into some other space. Like maybe I could get some balance or some rhythm in life, right? Some of the answers actually talk about gaps. This is an observation. how many of us have these gaps? When we think about 2 extra hours, like, you know what I tell myself? I mean, I'll just tell on myself. I'm like, 2 extra hours. I would finally get to the gym, right? And I'd probably practice my guitar, right? There is a version of me that exists up here that is in great physical condition and practices my instrument. It's delusional, right? And I like to say, my kids are young, I'll get to the gym when my kids aren't. Okay, Steve, cool. Yeah, I bet, right? For many of us, when we think about 2 extra hours a day, we start to fill gaps. I'm like, I want to be the kind of person who takes this place in life seriously and is really good at it. I want to know things about the Bible or the scriptures. I want to be creative. I want to paint. I want to be somebody that cooks. I want to be someone that, fill in the blank. And we describe a gap between the me that exists up here and the me that exists because of the way I've put my life together, right? And the last thing that I would observe that many people talk about is the fullness, in areas of fullness. Like, something is missing from my life. These would be things like, you know what's missing from my life is time and space for my life to feel really full. One of the observations that I would make is this. Whatever you do with your current time is probably the way that you would manage 2 extra hours of time. If you're honest with yourself. Does this feel right? So I'm not going to magically become a person that goes to the gym for 2 hours because I get 2 extra hours. I would probably fill those 2 hours with similar things to the way that I've structured and put my life together now. Most people, given 2 extra hours, given 4 extra hours, giving 6 extra hours, you would fill those hours with pretty much what you do now. Maybe a little different. But if we don't find time for exercise now, 2 extra hours may not actually be the thing that's missing. If we don't take time to cook now, 2 hours may not be the thing that's actually keeping us from it, right? Many of us would fill the time with exactly what we do now, but different. A few people, if they were honest, would say, yeah, but I actually long for something different in those 2 hours. And that, my friends, is one of the things that Sabbath is about. Sabbath is space to reflect, to be thoughtful, to realize the things that you care about, the things that are deep and life-filling, the things that we were created to experience. This day where we don't continue to work and work and work, one of the things that happens in that space is all of a sudden other places in life get reoriented. Sabbath is this acknowledgement from God that you need to stop. You need some space. You need to actually be able to engage these rhythms of prioritizing what matters to me, what matters to you. It's pretty rare that when somebody goes through this 2 extra hours experiment, that they go, like full Jerry Seinfeld, right? I would just do nothing, right? What would you do if you had 2 hours? Nothing. It's even more rare that somebody goes, well, I'd do exactly what I do right now, just slow. I would just slow my pace, right? And only a true sociopath would go, well, I just get in the long line everywhere I go. Because where have I got to be? Right? More often than not, when we think about these exercises like this, what happens inside of us is something rises up within us that clues us into something about the way we were made, the way that God intended life to look, the pace, the rhythm, and how maybe it's a little different from what our pace looks like now. I want to take you to a few scriptures. This is where it's all good to reflect, it's all good to make observations about the pace of life, but actually the powerful, transformative place is found in the scriptures around Sabbath. So let's go to that place. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, we find our first example of the place and priority of rest. It happens so early in the story. It happens before anything gets broken, right? Let me read this to you. Genesis 2, 1 through 3. So the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was complete. And on the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation. So he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all of his work of creation. This is perplexing. The God of the universe creates for 6 days and then he gets tuckered out? That can't possibly be it. We know from other scriptures that that's not probably what's going on here. Isaiah 40 says in verse 28, do you not know, have you not heard, that the Lord is an everlasting God, like no beginning, no end, the creator of the ends of the earth, and he does not grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. So if God when God rests, it's not because he's like tuckered out from scattering galaxies across the sky, right? Like I put toppings on pizza, right? If he's not resting because he's tuckered out, then what exactly is it that we see when we see and God rested? He's not running out of steam. Now, the word for rest in the Hebrew, there's a couple of words for rest. One of them is Sabbath, which just simply means he stops. This is the word that we see. He stops creating. Right? This is the word Sabbath. It literally appears in this creation narrative. God created for 6 days and then he stopped. There's this other word that emerges only a few verses later, nuach. And it's also translated as rest, but it actually means to abide or to rest in. Here's something interesting. One of my Hebrew professors that had an impact on me said this, Steve, you will never understand the purpose of Sabbath for people unless you understand what God is up to in Genesis chapter 2. He stops creating in order to enjoy the goodness of everything that he's made, and then he reigns. He reigns over it. His presence, his abiding presence, rests in or holds everything together. God creates and he creates and he creates and he creates and he creates, and then he stops and he enjoys the goodness of everything that he's made, and his presence holds it together. That's what we're seeing. So people who don't Sabbath, for those of us Western people who don't Sabbath, what we're actually doing is we're cursed to work without stopping. Right? We're living out of tune with the way that God made the world, and it's like we're cursed to just work and 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 work, right? To never slow down. Here's the sad part of not Sabbathing, if we can turn it into a verb. When we don't Sabbath, we don't take time to see the goodness of God in everything around us. And when we don't Sabbath, and this is perhaps the saddest part, we start to believe we're the ones that hold the world together, which is the initial mistake of humanity. What could possibly be more tragic for us as Christians than constructing a pace of life where we have to play God to hold things together? It's not very Christian, right? So what we see in the next passage of scriptures that we're going to look at is this. God interacts with humanity and he gives some instructions to a group of people who are living in the wilderness. Have you ever heard of these? There's 10 of them, 10 instructions. Anyone? Sometimes we call them commandments. I think they're better understood as instructions for how to regain our humanity. The first 4 of them have to do with how we live in relationship with God, and the next 6 of them have to do with how we live in relationship with each other. The interesting thing as you look through these first 4 about our relationship with God is this. It says this: no other gods, instruction number 1. Don't worship or love anything else more than God, instruction number 2. Instruction number 3, don't take our relationship lightly or be flippant about it, right? And then instruction number 4 about living in right relationship with God, the final instruction goes like this in Exodus chapter 20. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but on the 7th day, that is the Sabbath day of rest, the word here is of stopping, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household can do work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male, your female servants, your livestock, the foreigner that lives among you. It's like all the loopholes are closing, right? And then why? For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, everything in the sea and everything in them. And on the 7th day he stopped. And that is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath and set it apart as holy. You got to remember that the people that are hearing this from God just came out of slavery in Egypt. They were working 6 days and then another day, and then starting the next 6 days and working another day on the 7th. And it was work and work and work and work and no rest. They were in slavery. They were only worth what they could produce in Egypt. In this evil empire, there is only work, there is not rest, right? And when God brings them out, every one of the 10 plagues that you see in the story of Moses is actually God dismantling the idea that there are other gods that actually can put the world together. Only he can put the world together. And when God delivers the people from Egypt in this short window of time, you would think, that's fantastic. He's brought them out of slavery. But the interesting thing is this: it only takes a little bit for God to bring the people out of slavery in Egypt, but it takes 40 years in the wilderness for him to take Egypt out of the people. When you live in a culture that goes and goes and goes and never stops, what you start to realize is it gets in you like yeast in the dough. It's hard to take out. It takes God an entire generation in the desert, in the wilderness, in order to remove this constant churning cycle of 7 days and no rest that they had learned in Egypt. And the crucial thing that God teaches them in the wilderness is this: he is the one that creates. He is the one that provides. He is the one that holds them together, and he did not intend them for slavery. Also, he teaches them this: you are not God. You do not hold the world together. I hold the world together. And the objection when we sort of look at things in the Old Testament is this: well, yeah, Steve, okay, fair game. I get it. But that's like an ancient people group in some other place, in some other era of human history. But I would suggest this: there is some Egypt in a culture where all the stores are open 24/7. Would you agree? There is some Egypt in a society that pings each other with emails and text messages and connections, and I need your response, and I need your response, and I need this now. Hey, just this time. I know it's your day off, but I need this from you today, even though it's your day off. There is some Egypt in that. Maybe Egypt isn't just an ancient world power. Maybe Egypt is alive and well in the form of more food, more drink, more clothing, more stuff, more square footage, more, until you've accumulated so much that now you have to work constantly to keep up the things you've accumulated. We'll talk about that for an entire weekend. See, maybe when it comes to rhythms of Sabbath and rest, God needs to get some Egypt out of Western people, even ones in the church. I wonder what it would look like if the people of this community stopped for an entire day and let God have it. John Mark Comer says this in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He says, Sabbath is guerrilla warfare against the West's twin gods, accomplishment and accumulation. So let's talk about Jesus interacting with Sabbath. And then we're going to spend some time reflecting and praying. In Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28, you can turn there, I think it'll be on the screen. Here's the story of Jesus engaging Sabbath. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads off of grain, right? Like this, not that much work, right? But the Pharisees said to him, look, why are you doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath? See, over the course of time, the Pharisees had turned Sabbath into this long list of rules of things that you, can't do that. Looks a bit like work. Until all of a sudden, Sabbath was like this thing that people, Sabbath again, right? It wasn't life-giving, filling rest. It was law observance, disconnected from the heart of the thing in the first place. So Jesus answers, verse 25. Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the priest, he entered into the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is only lawful for priests to eat, and he gave it to some of his companions. Jesus cites someone eating something holy that they shouldn't have eaten, but who does he cite? David, the king that represented the Messiah who would come in full. It was like there once was a king that God had anointed, and he lived in a very priestly way. Maybe there's another king and priest who is present with you right now that you're talking to about violating Sabbath with all your rules. Can you see what Jesus is doing? Verse 27, he said to them, and this is the part we don't want to miss, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Is Jesus saying there's no need for Sabbath anymore? No. What he's actually doing is the same thing he does in every interaction that he has with the Pharisees. He's retelling things to them in a way that gets back to the heart and the purpose of it. Jesus isn't going to abolish Sabbath. He's going to fulfill it like he does all of the rest of the law, and then he's going to fill that day, that rhythm, that time with himself and his presence. Man isn't made for the Sabbath like some kind of like square peg and a round hole. Sabbath is made for people to remember some very important things. It's not a rule to be kept. It's a holy rhythm of life where we experience life and life to the full. It's a reminder that we're not cursed to work and work and work without stopping. It's an invitation to slow down and see the goodness of God around us. And it's a reminder that you are free. You are free from being the one that holds the world together. Is this making sense? A day of rest is one of the rhythms in the life of Jesus that reorients a lot for us. Here's a little practical application. Let's talk about how we actually do it in life, right? Because otherwise it's just some cool ideas and then we leave, right? Here's the challenge. Try it. 24 hours where work and busyness are off limits. Some of us just immediately go, yeah, but. Don't just stop. No buts. Right? Try it. Give it a go. And it may be clunky at first. Have you ever noticed, like an IT example, how if you leave a computer on forever and never shut it down and turn it back on again, it gets all glitchy and weird and doesn't do things the way it's supposed to? What happens when you turn it off and on again? Magically, it works. Sabbath is turning it off and on again, right? So try it. 24 hours to hit reset in the week. And here is, no, okay, Steve, yeah, great. But what do I do in that 24 hours? I'm going to give you some rules for Sabbath. Okay? There's only one of them. Anything that helps you to realize the goodness of God and that you don't hold the world together. Does that sound broad enough? I've got friends that do things when they're resting that do not look like rest to me. You're not trying to do somebody else's program. You're trying to engage the things. I have this thing that I did about 6 months ago where I made a life-giving list. It was all the places, the people, and the things that I do that after I do it, I feel like my whole world is filled back up again. And what goes in Sabbath for me and my family? Things from the life-giving list. Things that remind me of the goodness of God, the goodness of being a human being. We'll get to that in just a moment. Here's the third principle for Sabbath. First is just try it, because you don't experience it until you try it. The second is fill that time with anything that creates or stirs up gratitude and worship in you. And the third thing is this. When busyness tries to push into that space, because it will. You know what happens the first day you try Sabbath? A work emergency. I promise it. A work emergency or a car breaks down or items will stack up for 6 days on your to-do list where you're like, wow, this week was weird. I guess I'll start next week, right? This inevitably happens. When we try and engage a rhythm of the life of Jesus, something comes up, right? So when something tries to creep into that Sabbath place without shame or embarrassment or anything like that, because we're not trying to make it rules where you can't even pick wheat, right? But just remind yourself, here's the tool. Remind yourself. I don't hold the world together. And then decide whether or not you're going to engage it on Sabbath. It's a beautiful reorienting thought. So I'm going to close with this. About 3 months ago, my wife and I were far too busy. Life. I was an example of many of the things that I'm talking about. There was a lot of work, a lot of travel, a lot of busy, a lot of busy, a lot of busy. And my wife and I had this conversation about, man, life is really full. If we don't have a day, a holy day, a day of rest, this Sabbath that we see in the scriptures and the life of God, we are just going to go and go and go and go and go. And life's going to just pass us by. So about 3 months ago, we started this thing where I come home from work on Fridays, and Brooke has been making homemade pizza, which is on my life-giving list. She makes amazing pizza. And I come in the doors, and I get down on my knees, and Jack and Trudy run over to me, and I go, "What day is it?" And they go, "It's Sabbath." And I go, "And what do we do on Sabbath?" And they go, "Rest and play and eat." Because in the Jones home, those are things that stir gratitude and worship. And in the spring and the summer, we do a lot of fishing. And in the fall, we're going to be jumping in leaf piles. And in the winter, it's going to be sledding and fireplace sitting and football games on TV. It's going to be the fun, joyful gathering, being together kind of stuff of life. It's going to look how it looks in the Jones home, as long as it reminds us to be full of worship, to drink in the goodness of the world as God made it. Then it goes in Sabbath. Whatever allows gratitude to well up within us.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.